Well, open up your Bible with me, if you would, to 1 John chapter 4. We're in a series called If Then, a study of the letters of John. And so we're looking at not the Gospel of John, but we're looking at his letter, his three letters that he wrote to the church. And he writes to the church for a lot of reasons why the first century believers wrote to the church was to help the church and to encourage the church and to build the church up. And so one of the things that he's in particularly addressing are people that have left the community, left the family of God, and they're on the outside, but they're trying to entice people to come along with them. And last week we talked about the importance of you and I breaking up with the world and its systems. Of just finally kind of breaking it off and saying, okay, I'm done being a slave to the world and its systems. Today, I want to talk about this whole thought of who are we listening to? Like the individual people. I'm not talking about corporately in terms of the world like I was last week. Today, I want to talk about specifically who are you listening to? And I want to preach a message called Test It. Test It. Or maybe put it to the test. Or mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Those are three titles, whatever one you feel comfortable with. But in 1 John chapter 4, verse 1 through 6, it reads like this. John writes, he says, dear friends, now listen to this. This is key. This is the crux of the whole message. Do not believe every spirit. He says, dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. Because many false prophets have gone out into the world. This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. But every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming, and even now is already in the world. And then he says, you dear children. So now he went from friends and now he's communicating them as dear children. So the relationship is growing closer by the sentence. You dear children are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than one who is in the world. They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God, and whoever knows God listens to us. But whoever is not from God does not listen to us. This is how we recognize the spirit of truth and the spirit of falsehood. Let's pray together today over the preaching of God's word. God, I pray that you would give every single one of us a discerning heart. God, that we would be great people as we follow you, that know how to discern, God, the spirit of truth versus the spirit of falsehood. Let us not accept everything as it is presented. In Jesus' name, and we all said, amen, amen. Anybody in here, you ever have a hard time when it comes to making decisions? Like there are really two types of people in the world, right? There are overthinkers, and then there are people that could stand to do some thinking. Right? Those are the types of people. Right? Now, let me see your hand if you're a classic overthinker. Let me see your hand. I want to know you're kind of a classic, you just overthink everything. You stand at your closet for 9 minutes. You're just an overthinker. Like even now, you're listening to me, but you're like, okay, where are we going to lunch? Because you got to start now. Because you're like, I'm not sure I'm gonna be ready to make that decision in the next hour and 45 minutes. You're just an overthinker, right? Now, how many of you, come on, let's be honest, you're in the category, you're like, I could probably stand to do some more thinking than I do before I make decisions. Let me see your hand. Yeah, you kind of jump and you're like, I hope somebody catches me. I hope someone's down there. Right? You just kind of have that. Now, the reality is this, a lot of us probably at different times and based on different circumstances are a combination of the two. Like there are times when I am a classic overthinker. There are times where I get in my own head. One of the times that most happens is when I'm trying to figure out where I want to work from. If there's a particular time where I don't have tons of meetings and I don't have to go into the office, I will spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out where do I want to work from. Like, do I want to work from home? Do I want to work from the Lake Miriam Starbucks? Do I want to work from the Bartow Starbucks? Do I want to work from the North Side? Do I want to work from the Southgate Starbucks? Do I want to work from the... I will spend an inordinate amount of time. And sometimes, this has even happened. Sometimes I have even walked up. I don't know if you've ever done this. This is like the OCD thing. Pray for me. Because there have been times where I have even walked up to the door of a Starbucks, put my hand on the door, opened up the door and went, I'm just not feeling it. I'm just not feeling it. Got in the car and drove to another place. Come on, anybody else like that? Come on, please help me, please. Okay, cool, I'm not alone. I will, so sometimes I am a classic overthinker, but then there are other times where I find myself in a situation and I'm like, I did not think that all the way through. Did not think that through till the end. And one particular occasion that instantly jumps to my mind as it pertains to that is at our house that we lived at previously, I had always, no matter how old you get, if you're like a guy, it's like you always want to do certain things. Like there's always like a little bit of 12-year-old boy inside of you. And so every house that I've ever like lived at, one of my first thoughts is always, I wonder how you get on the roof. It's just always, no matter how old you are, you're like, I wonder how I get on the roof of this place. And one of our particular homes that we lived in, I had never been on the roof. And so there was a particular situation where we have like this little screen and there's been some debris that had gotten on the screen. And so I pulled out the ladder and I'm getting off like this debris. And I think to myself, I think I can get on the roof from here right now. I think if I stand on top of the ladder, like the very top one, and push myself off of the screen and then walk like 4 steps on like, on those screens where it's just got like a little like, 2-inch, like I think I could walk 4 steps on that and end up on the roof. And that'd be pretty awesome. I didn't really know what I was gonna do on the roof, but I just wanted to be there. You know what I mean? And so sure enough, I get up on the roof and I'm standing out there and I'm like, this is pretty amazing. This is awesome. This is fun, right? So, and then Christina comes around the corner and she sees me and I'm like, on the roof, She's like, what are you doing up there? I'm like, I don't know. And I'm up there just kind of hanging out. But then it came time to get down. How many of you know it is easier to get up than it is to get down? And what I didn't figure out is, how am I gonna walk on the crossbeam and then lower myself? Because I had to stand on the very top of the ladder to push myself up. How am I gonna do this and not put any weight on the screen part? And so I'm kind of at the edge and I'm kind of like this and I'm on the crossbeam and I'm like, I don't know how I'm supposed to get there. I don't know. So I got to this place where I'm like, I have one choice. And the one choice is to jump. That is my only choice. And you ever find yourself in that situation and you start talking to yourself? And so literally there's video of me going, it's not that high. It's not that high. It's not that high. It's not that high. And you're trying to convince yourself, and I'm sitting up there and I end up jumping off, and when I hit, you can just hear, like you can just hear that. Twisted my ankle. It was awesome. It was great. But I get up there and I'm like, how am I gonna get down? Life is full of these kind of moments where we're trying to take on information and then make decisions. Now, these decisions are trite and of very little consequences, but there are some decisions that you're gonna have to make that have major, major consequences. And so the question remains is this, is what information do I need to make a decision? Like, what information do you need in order to make sound decisions? Now, we live in a day and age where we have access to a lot of information, where we have access to a ton of information. And what I see is a lot of us tend to go one of two directions with the sheer amount of information that we have. The first kind of route that we tend to take, and some of you, you're these kind of people, where like, the first route that we can take is we believe everything we hear. Right? The first route is, I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people and they'll be like, hey, did you hear that? And they will say something, and honestly, I'm thinking on the inside, and sometimes I even tell them on the outside, I'm like, look, hey, that did not happen. I'm just here. If it sounds too crazy, then there's a chance that probably didn't happen in just the way. But what happens is we get inundated with so much information, we just believe everything. Conversely, The other route that we go is that we've been inundated with so much information. Sometimes you get to where I've gotten to sometimes where you just don't believe anything. Come on, have you ever gotten to that place where you're like, I believe nothing anymore? I just believe, I don't care what news channel I see it on. I don't care what study they did. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And so we tend to go these different routes, but I want to kind of give us a third option because this is the more difficult option. This is the option that actually takes and requires something of us. And it's this option where we do the difficult work of gathering and discerning and then making godly decisions. Where we gather information. Information is good. There is safety in information. But you can't just stop at information, because I've seen people amass a lot of information and make really poor decisions. Because sometimes it's the wrong information. Sometimes it's too much information, and then we get in a state of paralysis where we're afraid. Because how many of you know you can find just as much data on every side of the article? Right? You can find whatever you want. This is why, by the way, if you are a follower of God, we believe that the Spirit of God dwells within the life of the believer that allows you to have a discerning spirit in which you can make decisions. And so you can take on information and go, okay, after the information, that's all great, but what is the Spirit of God saying? And what is the Spirit of God leading me in? And then you make decisions, which, let me add this caveat, with no pride. Because come on, let's be honest. Sometimes, and Christians weren't, if you're a Christian, sometimes we're not the best at this. Sometimes we make godly decisions, but we are sure proud of our godly decisions, and we let our neighbors know it. The goal is, how do I take in information, allow the Spirit of God to discern it, and then make a decision in humility? That is the goal of what we are trying to do. Decisions in life are not as simple as just amassing the information. So my only point today is this: accepting and rejecting. This is the wisdom the Spirit of God provides. See, listen, life is about this. What are you going to accept? What counsel, what wisdom, what advice, what instruction, what information? What are you going to accept and allow that to govern you? And then what is the information, the instruction that you are going to reject and therefore not allow that to guide you? The problem is we have a hard time sometimes figuring out what to reject and what to accept. And I love that in 1 John chapter 4, he's kind of helping us out, giving us a little roadmap. He says this, he says, dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out in the world. And this is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. See, it's important to test things before purchasing, especially the greater the cost and the greater the usage, the more scrutiny that thing has to come under. Right? The greater the cost, the greater the usage, the more scrutiny that thing has to come under. Like, I remember this last year, Christina and I, we had to buy a new mattress. And buying a new mattress is a fascinating thing. It's a weird thing. I don't know, anybody, you have to buy a new mattress recently? Like, you had that whole experience where you go into the store and you're like, I'm gonna lay on some things today. Right? I'm gonna be fully clothed. And I'm just gonna lay on stuff that thousands of other people have laid on. I'm just gonna lay on there. I'm gonna lay on this stuff, right? And you walk into this store in the middle of the day. You can't even dim the lights. Just the middle of the day, and you go in and you just start laying on yourself, and you start laying on these mattresses. And how many? Sometimes you lay and you're like, no, definitely, right away, right? You just lay down, you're like, no, right? And then, by the way, you're trying to compare it, because you're gonna spend a good amount of money on a mattress. You're trying to compare it, and sometimes you're like, do we really need another one? Right? You're trying to compare it. You're like, does this feel better? Like, hey, would you guys be okay if I brought my bed and we just laid that in here as well, and I could just go back and forth real quick and kind of compare in real time. And so Christina and I, right? And the reality is, listen, we spent so much time like laying on a mattress. Like it's all weird. Like you guys would have walked in, me and Christina are spooning on a mattress. It's weird. It got weird, like, you know what I mean? Like, and like, oh, that's my pastor's. This is weird. Like, it's like, it's famous Tate's. Like, what's going on? This is public, right? But we spend so much time laying on this thing. I mean, like trying to like think through. We laid on so many mattresses until we settled on something. Why? Because it had to be tested because the usage was so high. See, some of you accept information and you allow it to like inform really big decisions in your life. The usage is high, but you've put in that information under very little scrutiny. And then we wonder why we're making such destructive decisions, such bad decisions, is because we take in information and we don't really like put it through the gauntlet. We don't really put it through any sort of scrutiny, and then we make decisions based off it, and we're like, how come that didn't work out? I'm confused because you didn't take the time to put that information through a proper test. I was recently talking to my best friend Tyler, and he said this. I just love this, and he was actually in reference to somebody that we had went to high school with, and he said this. In fact, this is exactly why I had to get off Facebook like years and years ago, like about 10 years ago now, because I was like, man, I just cannot see 29-year-olds still doing keg stands. I got to get out of here. Like, this is a desperate place. I gotta go. So that was just my reasoning for like bouncing, like, about 10 years ago. And he said this. He said, because we're seeing people that we graduated high school with, like, making all kinds of decisions, having all kinds of different worldviews. And this is what Tyler said. He said, it's just interesting because the Jesus way really is the best way. He says, just the best. Let's go pure practical. Let's just go pure wisdom, pure counsel from Jesus. That just living the Jesus way will produce fruit in your life that living in another way will not produce. And so the question is, this is a big question then. So then how do I know if the information I'm receiving is the Jesus way? Right? How do I know that what I'm listening to, what I'm hearing is the Jesus way? Because I have heard people give terrible advice and I've heard people give great advice. By the way, people that also claim God. I have heard people that love God, claim God, but say they're a Christian, give terrible advice. And I've been around people that love God, like, say they're a Christian, give great advice. In fact, I remember we had one of our guys that was graduating, and there was somebody else that he had a relationship with, and they had asked him, and he said that instead of going to take a youth pastor job somewhere else, that he was going to stay here and just serve, get a job in the city and serve. And this person came up to him, and this is what they said. They said, so you're giving up on ministry, huh? And he was like, well, no, that's not really how I see it. I'm still doing ministry. Like, I'm just, like, vocationally, I'm just going to get a job, but, like, I'm still serving at my church. And this is what I thought. Can I give you, like, the candid version of what I thought? Well, the almost candid version. I thought, how dumb is that advice? Like, how ungodly, how unbiblical, how foolish, how foolhardy is that type of counsel? And this is what I think. I don't think a lot of people, especially people that love God, they don't want to give bad advice, but they do it all the time. They don't want to give bad, like none of us go, how can I give bad counsel to my friends today? I'd love to tell my kids to do things that are absolutely going to harm them. But here's a reason. I wrote down a few reasons why I think people just give bad counsel. Number one, misery loves company. Misery loves company. So you're single people, they want you to be single. You're people that left their spouse, they want you to leave your spouse. Your friends that are hanging out all night and making horrible decisions, they want you to hang out all night and make horrible decisions. Your friends that spend money that they don't have want you to spend money that you don't have. Right? Misery loves company. I think another reason why people give bad counsel is inexperience. They're just inexperienced. Like, can I encourage you, if you're single, stop asking advice from your single friends. They don't know. Like, they don't know. Like, if they knew the secret, they'd apply it themselves. They you know what I mean? Like stop asking people that aren't good with money about money things. Like, it's just, and again, it doesn't make people bad people. It's just inexperience. I just ask people questions that have experience in those particular areas. I think another reason why people give bad counsel is unhealth. When we're unhealthy, honestly, we don't even fully know what we're saying. And that's not to like let people off the hook. That is to give some grace though. I think sometimes we just give bad counsel when we're tired, when we're unhealthy, when we're not in a great place. And then you look back and you're like, man, I gave some bad counsel because actually like I was in an unhealthy place. Another reason why people give bad counsel is they just have a different worldview than you. Be careful asking people for advice that want different things out of life than you want. You know what I mean? Like we're looking at people that want something totally different, and then we're confused when they give us like advice that isn't in our worldview. Well, we all don't have the same worldview. We all want different things out of life. Conversely, though, I've been around some people that have given great advice. I mean, man, I've been around, in fact, a handful of years ago, I think I've shared this story before, but it was so good. It was so impactful to me. I was at Starbucks, and I was eavesdropping. You know there's a V in eavesdropping? Did you know that? Like, I just blew some of your minds today. You know what I mean? I was eavesdropping, right? And I was at Starbucks, and I was outside, and I was working on my message. But these two gals were having a conversation. They must have been college age gals, I was surmising that they might have been Christians, but I wasn't 100% sure. But one of them was giving the other counsel, was giving the other advice, and the person who was receiving the counsel had just had this guy break up with her, and she was saying stuff like, yeah, but I just told him like if he ever wants to come back, even if it's like a year or two, like I'll be here, and I'll still be around, and I'll like. And I was listening to this, and I was like, oh, I might have to jump in the middle of this conversation. I might have to do something. I might have to. But you know what? I didn't even have to, because her friend so sweetly, so gracefully, so with wisdom, within her age-appropriate authority, within the grace that God is just giving her counsel. And I'm just like listening to this like college-age gal, just like a surgeon go through and just give such great counsel. I mean, it was so good. And what was funny is like literally afterwards, I pack up my stuff and I'm walking out and like, I have to say something. I'm like, hey, just sorry, but I heard everything. I just heard everything. I know I had headphones on, but I muted them. I have not been listening to music. I've just been going like this for the last 30 minutes. But I want you to know that this is a really good friend, and she is giving great counsel. And then I left, and then I found out later she actually goes to our church. I'm like, of course she goes to our church. You gotta be careful who you listen to. You gotta be mindful of the people that you are allowing to speak into your life. So we must exercise discernment, especially, honestly, from even people that claim God. Because here's what I found to be true about life. There is no authority like spiritual authority. This is why so many people try to co-opt God when they're sharing their ideas. Because God gives you an authority that is hard to ascertain anywhere else. And so people not speaking for God claim to speak for God because they try to borrow the authority of God. And you and I can discern the difference if we're paying attention. You and I, if we really got our spiritual antennas up, we can go, I'm not really sure. I wrote down a few ways that I call it the false prophet radar. Can I give you there's three things? It's not exhaustive, but just like a little bit of false prophet radar, like of just like, whoa, I should be careful of this, right? Okay, here's the first one. People who want a big voice without pastoral responsibility. People who want a big, you want to know a way that I could probably help a lot of you? Or that Pastor John could help a lot of you, or Christina, or Holly Joe, or Alex, or like our whole crew. You want to, if you're listening to like your favorite prophet online, or you see something online, you know what probably would have saved a lot of us from going crazy and thinking like Trump was going to be president like on March 18th? Stop, that was too serious. That was too serious. I could feel it in the room. That was too serious. You want to know what could have saved? I like that one. I personally thought it was funny. But honestly, you know what could have saved a lot? Honestly, just set up a meeting. I'd love to go, hey, here's some biblical. Because there's a difference between what somebody wants and what God is actually saying. There's a difference between wishful thinking and what God said. And I think we had too many people, and we have too many people in the world because now everybody has access to everybody. And some prophet or somebody that wants a big voice and wants to co-opt God and have no pastoral responsibility over people. Because the reality is, you listening to that person, they're not the ones that has to deal with it. You want to know who has to deal with it? This guy. Somebody who has pastoral responsibilities. Somebody who has pastoral. Be careful of people that want to have a strong opinion in your life, but will not be there to help you pick up the pieces if you listen to their advice and it's a destructive decision. Be very careful. I'm people's pastor, and I'm very careful when I give kind of like, hey, you should do this. I kind of try to give principles because I'm very careful because I'm not the one that has the responsibility and that is going to be left there holding the bag if you actually do exactly what I tell you. So you gotta be careful of listening to people that have no pastoral responsibility over your care and over your life, and yet wanna have a big voice. Here's another false prophet radar: people whose character you don't know. People whose character you don't know. So you can't really see if that approach is working. Like, you're not in proximity enough to see if the advice and the counsel that they're giving is actually working. And then third and finally, kind of false prophet radar is people whose counsel comes from a jaded place, or like I said, a wishful place. By the way, that's stuff you can sense. Like, we've all been in those moments where we've heard things and we went, that doesn't quite sit right. Can I encourage you? Don't be too quick to dismiss that. Yes, run that through your pastors. Yes, run that through your city group leaders. Yes, run that through kind of the spiritual care that kind of, that has been provided for you. But don't just buy everything everybody's selling. Allow it to be worked out. That's why I'm never offended when we have somebody that comes to our church, and this happens a good amount of times where I'll be talking to somebody out in the lobby, or somebody will set up a meeting and they'll say something like this. They'll go, listen, I'm not buying everything you're selling. They'll say that, I'm not buying everything you're selling, but I keep coming back because there's something about it. I go, awesome, you don't have to buy everything. Just hang out for a while. Just hang out for a while. Learn the character of Grace City. Learn the character of our people. Learn the character, learn the consistency of what God's doing. And then you'll figure it out, and that's okay. But be really, really careful. And then he goes on to say in verse 4, he says, you, dear children, are from God. You have overcome them because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. That's good news today. They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. I want to have the team come up. I want to finish with a couple thoughts. But I was meeting with a guy this last week. I love, honestly, one of the things that honestly is the joy of what I get to do is I get to just meet with people throughout the week that go to our church and that are a part of our church and that are new to our church and have been in our church for years. And I met with this guy this last week, and it was one of those conversations, honestly. I left and I was so inspired, so filled up, and he's been coming to the church, and he admitted this, his wife is amazing. He's like, my wife loves God, and he goes, me, I didn't grow up in this, so this is all new for me. So this is all so my wife wants us to trust God, and I'm like, okay, but what does that mean practically? And I began to just ask him questions about his life, and one of the questions I asked him, I said, hey, have you ever been in a spot where you were like, I have no idea how I'm gonna make it through this? And he was like, lots of times. You ever been in a season of life where you're like, I have no idea? Yeah, lots of times. And I said, me too. You wanna know what I believe is, even when you weren't serving him, even when you were disinterested, even when you didn't acknowledge that it was him, here you are. And God was caring for you long before you were even thinking about him. Long before your heart even started to bend. He's at the beginning. His heart is even just starting to bend towards the things of God. He's thinking about God. So God's been with you every step of the way. What you don't realize is that God was the one that helped you navigate that. And if you're following Jesus, you got to know this, right? We preach that. We say that in ministry times all the time, right? Greater is he that is in you and he that is in the world. See, the reality is this. You got to trust the God within. Not that you're God. Don't mishear that. You got to trust that the God of the universe dwells within you and gives you a discernment and gives you clarity and gives you focus. And yes, he gives you pastors and he gives you people in your world to help you, but you got to really, really be mindful that God is a personal God, that God is walking with you every step of the way, and God has been carrying you even when you were disinterested in him. This is why what voices you allow to speak in are so important. Because what I've found to be true about my own life is those voices can either snuff it out or add fuel to the fire. Whoever you allow speaking into your life, they can either snuff it out or add fuel to it. But my personal belief is this, is that you gotta pick, right? He says in verse 6, we are from God, and whoever knows God listens to us. But whoever is not from God does not listen to us. This is how we recognize. So he's talking about, hey, look, there's two people clamoring for your attention. There's the people that are of God genuinely, and then there are people that are claiming God, but not really of God. I'm telling you, that is a world in which we're living in right now. I know a lot of times we focus on like the world and secularism and all this kind of stuff, but we got to be mindful that there is a third voice, and that is people that are claiming God that are not of God. We got to be mindful of that. It's kind of like my kids. My kids watch this show I hate. I do not like it. It's not that I hate it, it's just I'm over it. You know what I mean? I don't know if your kids ever like you, but they just watch the same thing over and over and over again. And they're on this homie named Blippi right now. You know, if you guys know about Blippi, don't do it. Don't let your kids do it. It's like a drug, okay? And they like Blippi. And we try to really limit how much time they watch TV in general. We really try to limit how much time they watch Blippi. Just as you can watch as much ESPN as your heart desires. Blippi, you got 8 minutes. The other night, like, okay, time to go to bed. And Justice's like, Blippi, can I watch Blippi? I'm like, Justice, you got to go to bed. We got to read and then go to bed. And he goes, no read. I said, okay. So you got two choices. I said, looking at Addie and Justice. I'm looking at both of them. They're like, I'm like, okay, guys, here's the deal. You can watch Blippi right now for 7 minutes, and then we're going straight to bed. No read. Or we can read and then go to bed. You pick. And they were like, Blippi. I go, okay. But just so we're clear, Blippi for 7 minutes and then no read. Night-night. Like, yeah, Blippi. Okay, yeah, all right. Sit there for 7 minutes, Blippi, right? So we give them a little countdown. Hey, you got 5 minutes left. You got 3 minutes left. They're like panicking watching Blippi. We're doing our best, guys. We're doing our best. And I knew what they were going to do. They're little hustlers. I knew it. Okay, boom. 1 minute. Boom. Blippi's off. Time to go to bed. I mean, Justice goes seizure mode, full-on seizure mode. Addie's freaking out. Like, no, we're not. Like, read. They start running to their room, start grabbing all their books, just start throwing all their books on their chairs and like, read. Like, I didn't read anything. Christina read a book. I knew they were going to do that because I knew they would want their cake and eat it too, like us. They wanted both. They wanted Blippi. They wanted to read too. And what I found to be true about life is you got to pick some voices. You got to pick some. You can't have all the voices in your head. You don't want all the voices in your head. You know, I remember Chase saying this one time. I just loved it. People, you know, he was having a conversation. I forget the context, but I remember him saying this. He was talking about, you know, we've been doing ministry together for a long time now, since he was 16 and I had hair. And And now you're what, 30, 31? 31 years old. And been doing ministry together 15 years, doing ministry with this guy. I remember somebody asked him one time, they're like, man, you've been rocking with Drew for a long time. How come you've been walking with Andrew for so long? And this is what he said. He goes, I trust the way he sees God. And I see God similarly. And that's why him and I think, have such a great relationship and are able to do ministry because of the way we see God. Can I encourage you? One, if you're at Grace City Church, I'm really glad you're here. Like if this is your church and this is your church home and we're so glad you're here. Because what that tells me is that you trust the way we see God here at Grace City Church. You just trust the way we see God. We're not perfect, but you trust the way we see God. If you're new to our church, we'd really like to earn your trust. To go, hey, we try to have as biblical and as sound and as grace-filled and as loving and as pastoral a tone and a reality as we possibly can. But you gotta pick somebody. You gotta pick a lane to run in because it will better attune your ear. See, in order to learn the lyrics to a song, you gotta listen to that song a bunch of times. And in order to experience the benefit of having a community of believers and a family of God, we gotta be walking in the same spirit. That's what John was talking about. He's going, guys, you can't have your ear over here and your ear over here. You're gonna be really frustrated. And on top of that, you're gonna be really confused and you're gonna get really hurt. But if you just say, you know what? I'm gonna take on the yoke of Christ. Grace City's my home. And I'm just gonna trust that God wants to grow me in and through this place. I think you're gonna see some incredible fruit in your life. And you're gonna start to eliminate some of the other voices that might claim God, but that probably don't have your best interest in mind. Come on, church, can we stand to our feet?